Leaving across the House, we have Lara. Lara is the former president of the Cambridge Union. She's currently a third year reading English at Downing College. She won this right to speak through open audition. Lara, you have the ears of the House.
Gosh, tough act to follow. Before I actually get to my speech, I want to take a brief moment just to thank Chris, because he's just thanked all his officers, and I do think he himself deserves a bit of praise. Chris's dedication over the past term to this place has been unrivaled. I think it goes without saying this has been an incredible Lent term at the Union. I've been at all the debates, they've been incredible, they've been fascinating. The range of speaker events has been numerous and varied and really quite interesting. And the whole Lent committee have worked so hard to promote free speech and debate, which is what this society is all about. And as Chris's housemate, I can't tell you how hard he's worked to make that a reality. He's been, as I always joke, he's at the Union before I wake up, he's still there when I go to bed. So I think from all of us, can we thank him one more time for that? Now, on to why he's completely wrong about this motion. So, radical systemic change. That sounds very exciting, doesn't it? It's going to be radical. That seems pretty crucial given the dire state of things that Chris laid out. And it's going to be systemic. So it's going to come in and bulldoze everything and put everything that's failing, replace with something that's great and new. And yet, I must admit, once I've got over my admittedly great excitement, I'm found there isn't that much left in your motion, Chris. History is full of promises like this. In every single time of adversity, it's a fact that popular calls for change, any change, just make it radical, make it systematic, are very common. And they're almost always empty. It's a really wonderful promise. Out with the old, in with a new utopia. A utopia better than you could ever imagine. But once we get behind ourselves and stop imagining a brighter tomorrow, what have we got left? When writing this op speech this morning, I must admit I found myself quite troubled by exactly what I was being asked to oppose. I think the motion wants me to defend the status quo, and then side prop can speak of radical paradigm-shifting change in any direction they want, to any great success they like, and I can only imagine how wonderful that's going to be. And Chris has made me quite excited about it. And tempting as it might be to spend 10 minutes criticising this motion for sort of not having content, I've just had a wonderful speech from Chris, and I've got a sense of the society you want, and so I'm going to engage on the terms of that. And therefore, I'm going to take radical systemic change from Chris to be espousing the views of Bernie Sanders, Wendy Brown, and Thomas Piketty. The views of the authors of the many hundreds of socialist books that you have lying around the house, Chris, hoping to convert your housemates. So I think we're looking at an economic model that looks a lot like democratic socialism, or a sort of, to borrow Piketty's phrase, participatory socialism. And I will say on this topic that I'm not sure, Chris, you've named a single policy that we can't do with the gradualism that I'm about to advocate for. I don't think overhaul is necessary or called for at this point. So side proposition have argued very compellingly that our current economic model is doomed to failure, and that swift and radical change is necessary and urgent if we're to address the growing problems of inequality that the UK face. Now, for the avoidance of any doubt, and possibly quite surprisingly, I want to stress that I completely agree with side proposition about every single problem you've identified the world and the UK faces. Inequality is unspeakably high. The climate is under extreme threat. Wealth is concentrated in the hands of the few, while thousands of families are forced to choose daily between going hungry and turning on their heating. Britain's poorest 50% own just 5% of our wealth. I doubt it's controversial to argue this is a completely untenable situation. What I am going to argue, however, is that radical systemic change would make it worse, not better. At every pivotal moment in human history, just like this, radical overhaul has never been and will never be the answer, no matter how easy it seems. Yeah, go for it. I completely support the right to protest. I think the right to protest is a crucial way of refining and improving our system. And I think that all sort of gradual change and improvement we've achieved has been done through that method. I think we've made massive strides in human rights and done great things without radical systemic change. We didn't have to implement socialism to abolish slavery. I need to get to the content of my speech, but thank you. Radical overhaul requires a decimation of everything that we have. It involves a blind desire to start anew, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as it were. And so now, if you'll humour me, I'd like to take us back to 1790 and to Edmund Burke's reflections on the revolution in France. I think Burke is often a figure cast as a man who opposed change wherever it presents itself, in whatever form, a man who wished to preserve the status quo constantly in amber. And this is quite an unfair characterization. Burke opposed slavery. Burke, throughout his career, wrote in favor of American revolutionaries at great political cost. He argued that the Americans justifiably sought fair equality, and he faced great opposition in doing this. He famously wrote to his friend Thomas Hussey in 1796, the first duty of a state is to provide its own conservation, but once secured, the purpose of public authority was to protect the rights of the people. In fact, I don't think Burke would have balked at the phrase people before profit, even if it's a bit ahead of his time. It's an eminently sensible, admirable sentiment, one that I share with you, Chris. The duty of the state must be to its people, to their rights, their livelihoods, their welfare. And it seems completely obvious that must come before companies. In fact, I suspect Burke would place companies at the bottom of the pecking order. What are the instruments of the state if they don't exist to serve its people? What Burke did object to, however, and what I'm objecting to tonight, was radical, unthinking, drastic change. Change that doesn't rest upon a foundation. Change that rests on a few abstract ideals which sound wonderful in principle but won't work in practice. Change which casts aside, without thought, what already works. Burke recognized that society and the people that inhabit it are limitlessly complicated. As such, we must handle this fine balance like a living organism. And over time, organisms evolve. They change, ever so gradually, without ever losing the fundamental principles on which they thrive. This is a sort of gradual evolution that Burke advocated for, and that I'm here to argue for tonight. Society is built upon a great wisdom of the ages. We have tried and tested different methods, and we've gradually evolved through trial and error. And this evolution has kept our core fundamental principles and allowed us to move forward consistently as a society. I'm about to conclude, but thank you. Consider how the terms of capitalism have shifted over the last 100 years. In the early 20th century, the proper regime and legal system favoured property owners and landholders over workers and local government in every single instance. Tenants could be evicted without cause. Workers had no right to strike, no cause against wrongful termination. Women were fired from factories when their employers found out they'd got married. People had no access to universal health care, and many went completely without intervention from a doctor because they simply couldn't afford it. The reforms that changed these facts were not revolutionary. They didn't come about through overhauls of a system. They were fundamentally not radical. And therefore, I'm here today to urge you to reconsider the value of gradual development. Income equality must be addressed, as must the climate crisis. But we can do this through incremental evolution to the system that we have. We can pump more and more money into R&D. We can do more research into renewables. We could even, as Chris raised, adopt universal inheritance as Piketty advises. These are all policy areas through which we can drastically improve our society without the sort of overhaul which creates political vacuums, poverty, and chaos. Just as this debate opened, we watched the handover of presidents, and we watched Chris pass the baton to wonderful James, and he'll do a great job. With this, another term at the Union began. This march tradition that has happened every term since the Society's conception in 1815. Many presidents have been and gone to the Cambridge Union, and they've come with exciting new ideas for the direction of the society. But throughout all of this, there's been a preservation of what matters, of our core fundamental principles, and of our unique way of doing things. I'm here to advocate for the conservation of this. We are all capable of great change, incredible change that could transform all of our lives. And I actually don't think any government is ever nearly ambitious enough in setting targets for this sort of change. Think about how much our lives have improved since before industrialization. We should aim, through development and technological improvement, to genuinely eliminate poverty and many other forms of hardship. However, this sort of growth is simply not achieved through blind revolution resting on abstract principles. So today, I urge you to vote to conserve the heart of society. Vote for what works and vote for what matters. Don't just vote for the status quo, because I accept it's completely broken. But vote for the incredible future that we can craft through gradual evolution, through refinement, and most importantly, through preservation of what's important. Thank you.